Let's recap the latest military developments now on the ground. Turkey says it's establishing a safe zone along its southern border, the first phase of which stretches 120 kilometres wide and more than 30 kilometres deep into Syrian territory. Turkish forces are battling for control of Ras Al Ain. The situation there is fluid, with both sides repeatedly claiming they have control of the town. So now, in addition to Turkish troops making their presence felt in Ras Al Ain, they have reclaimed full control of Tal Abyad, as we see in the areas in yellow. Turkish-led forces have also cut off the M4 highway. That's a vital supply line that runs through Kurdish-held territory from Manbij to Iraq. Turkish forces and their Syrian allies are on the outskirts of Manbij. This sets up a potential clash with the Syrian government troops, who have now entered inside the city as part of a deal with the Kurds. They've also taken control of Tabqa and moved into Ain Issa. Assad's troops are present in Hasaka province and the border city of Kamishli. Well, the Turkish president says the offensive has been a success so far. He's been addressing a meeting of Turkic countries in Azerbaijan.
Bugün harekatın 7. günündeyiz.
We are on the 7th day of the operation. Our military operation is continuing successfully as per the safe zone map we presented to the whole world at the 74th UN General Assembly. We have, as of this morning, cleared 1,000 square kilometres from the control of the separatist terror group.
Let's take you now to Charles Stratford, live from Akcakale, near Turkey's border with Syria. And it's a very fluid situation, Charles, at the moment. Take us through how this is playing out on the ground.
Yeah, I suppose in the last couple of hours or so, we've had a volley of artillery being fired from positions in this area across the border. As you reported in the intro, we now understand that the Syrian army are inside Manbij. That's that very strategically important town to the west of here, which is very much within the area of Turkey's plan to set up this safe zone. We understand that FSA fighters, these are these Syrian rebel fighters that have been brought in by the Turks to participate in this operation, are moving towards Manbij. We understand they could be as close as sort of 10 kilometres away. This, of course, is of huge concern and the focus of attention, we understand at the moment, very much of the Russians. The Russians saying that they are doing all they can to avoid some sort of confrontation between what is now two separate armies. We also hear reports from the city of Ras Al Ain, which is to the east of here, which has repeatedly been claims made by both sides of control there over the last few days. Still ongoing clashes there. I think it's worth pointing out, though, in terms of looking at the kind of ethnic mix and the complexities of this area, the men that are at the forefront of the Turkish campaign, those Syrian rebel fighters, are Arabs, and many of them lived in and around the Manbij area, but they were forced out during the battle against ISIL and indeed fighting the SDF. They are very keen to get back into that area, which of course has great historical importance for them. And there are, of course, questions being asked by military analysts and so on as to whether there is enough discipline amongst them to prevent any kind of escalation. The situation is fluid here and, as you can imagine, yeah, very tense.
Charles, thank you for that update. Now, world powers have long sought local allies in the Syrian conflict. The groups fighting in the northeast right now are no exception. The main target of the Turkish offensive is the SDF. That's the Syrian Democratic Forces. Now, they were the Obama administration's main ally in the fight against ISIL. SDF ranks are mainly filled with Kurdish fighters of the YPG. Ankara says this group is an offshoot of its banned Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, which has fought the Turkish government for decades. Meanwhile, Turkey has enlisted the help of the Syrian National Army, which was previously known as the Free Syrian Army. They are a rebel force of Syrian military defectors and citizens. Some of them were armed and trained by the US until Trump came into office. They now enjoy the backing of Turkey, which has boosted their numbers. Well, Mehmet Celik is managing editor of Daily Sabah, an English language newspaper. He joins us on Skype from Istanbul. It's nice to have you with us. There's a lot to discuss here, and I wanted to start first of all with just how this is playing out inside Turkey, the support for this incursion and also for President Erdogan?
Well, I think the operation into Syria against the YPG terrorists has created something that's not very usual in Turkish politics and in the public opinion, and that being a unified force when it comes to this operation. Aside from some small segments of the society, some radicals and marginalized groups, I mean, from the opposition to the government, pretty much the whole parliament is unified, except with the exception of the HDP, which is, ideologically linked to the PKK. But when it comes to the society, the public opinion, there is a very unified stance and support because there is an acknowledgement that the presence of YPG along Turkish borders is no different than the PKK presence in Turkey, and that it being a national security threat posed by the YPG, as the US call it, SDF, which is simply a name change, and the structure or the aims of the group are not any different than what the PKK has aimed for in the long term. So for that reason, Turkey's operation into Syria has received very strong support in the public opinion.
But are we hearing from Kurdish groups inside Turkey as well, who clearly are not going to be supportive as the rest of the country is?
Well, I disagree with that point, because if we come to that conclusion, and then we have to have the premise that Turkey is fighting Kurds as an ethnicity, as an ethnic group. But that's not the case. Turkey has said it numerous times, and I mean, the government has said it, the President Erdogan has said it, and there's also, I think, a very strong opinion from the Kurds themselves that now the YPG, which Turkey is fighting for, Turkey is fighting against, is actually throwing bombs across the border to Kurdish towns, to towns that are populated by the Kurdish population. So Turkey is not fighting the Kurds. If we agree that Turkey is fighting terrorists, then we would understand that the Kurds inside Turkey are also not against. There might be some criticism, but they're not against the elimination of YPG from Turkey's borders. I think that's a clear distinction we need to make between the Kurds as an ethnic group and between and the YPG or PKK as terrorist groups.
Now we have the Syrian government forces in position and fighting alongside Kurdish forces inside Syria. And of course, there is this concern of a direct clash between Turkish troops and also Syrian government troops. What's the prospect for that, or how do you even avoid that possibility?
Well, first of all, I think it would be a grave mistake for the Syrian regime to come into direct confrontation with Turkey. Secondly, I think the Russian effect is more significant than the presence of some forces loyal to the Assad regime in the areas where Turkey is conducting an operation. Turkey and Russia are having diplomatic channels open, and they're basically Turkey is looking at what Russia will do instead of Assad regime. I mean, Assad regime brought in some forces when Turkey was conducting an operation in Afrin, and they received the answer or the response that Turkey put forward, and they were pushed back. But there is a link. I mean, the relationship between YPG and Assad regime is also interesting to look at, because Assad regime claims to be wanting the territorial integrity in Syria, but YPG poses a threat to that. Yet at a time like this, they are willing to coordinate and cooperate against Turkey. So that's a little bit interesting to look at. But at the same time, Turkey and Russia have said that it's very unlikely that the Turkish forces will come to confrontation with the Assad forces. But the presence is very symbolic, I think, for the Assad forces to be there right now. However, how Russia will react or will coordinate Assad forces is more important for Turkey than the presence of some Assad forces in the area.
Yeah, clearly that Russian position is critical. Mehmet Celik, thank you so much for joining us there from Istanbul.